What about the profile of a multi-unit franchise operator? In your experience, Amy, how does that differ from the single unit franchise operator? Do you see any differences for somebody that inquires on a multi and or somebody that actually becomes a multi-unit franchise owner?
Yeah, I really think it's just appetite for risk.
Mm-hmm.
That really it's not there's not a proprietary skill set here that like, oh, to be multi-unit, yeah, your potentially your financing looks different than your access to capital maybe looks different than somebody who's just doing one location. If this model is playing out, that first location is helping you open your second and your third. So I really think it's more of a psychographic than like a demographic of our multi-unit looks like this, but single
Mm-hmm.
is a soccer mom who hasn't worked in 15 years, and multi-unit is a corporate woman who is wants the off-ramp. We have both and kind of everything in between. Our multi-unit one is coming to mind right now. She is highly successful and she has owned franchises in the past. So that absolutely plays into somebody's just ability to jump in and sort of know how to operate a franchise
Mm-hmm.
business. But that is not our prototypical franchisee.
Okay. And now, one of the roles that you play in the company, you technically are also the VP of franchise development, I think you said earlier to me. And with the franchise development role, talk to me about franchising in terms of what's the investment range per location? What's the average footprint size?
Yep. I believe our FDD says our range is 144 to maybe 315. So a bit of a spread there, but I am very comfortable telling somebody in any city USA, you can get your doors open for one salon for less than $250,000. And that is your franchise fee, and that is toilet paper in your salon on the day you open, and all that is included between those two milestones. And that 250 is really reflective of a square footage range anywhere from like at the small end, 850 square feet. High end would be closer to 13 to 1500. That higher end square footage is often reflective of a blueprint or a footprint that includes a party room. So that is part of our business that we are starting to roll out, is actually dedicated square footage to host events and parties.
Okay. What kind of party? I mean, obviously everybody doesn't need a haircut at the same time. So how does this party thing
Correct.
work?
Yeah, so I'll give you a real life example in Indianapolis where Taylor Swift has just come through with her Eras tour. We had a whole Eras programming. Little girls were scheduling or booking Taylor Swift inspired parties at our salon where they were getting glitter tattoos, getting sparkle strands in their hair, having fun snacks. It had nothing to do with getting their hair cut. Their
That is
parents were
brilliant.
booking our space as a place to celebrate going to the Taylor Swift concert. So that's an extreme sort of example of how creative we can get
Mm-hmm.
to your average birthday party, where it's like, I don't want to have that at my house. I don't want 8 little boys coming and making a mess. I'd much rather have an event where they're going and getting temporary tattoos and getting faux hawks and, having snacks and a great time at Sit Still.
I mean, that's brilliant. I love that. What about how did you find your first dozen or so franchise owners? Were they mostly customers?
Our first franchisees really were byproducts of our Bar3 experience. They were people who sort of followed the careers of my
Mm-hmm.
partners and I and saw that we were getting into a space that was actually very relevant to where they were in their own lives. So you can imagine, Bar3 at the time we left, 150 studios open across the country, all owned by women in their 30s and 40s who are moms.
Mm-hmm.
That's where that's skewed. So we sort of take a massive pivot into the kids' hair space. But between all those owners all the instructors and all the clients. It's a huge community that Bar3 has. And we had relationships with a lot of those people. So our first few franchisees were actually Bar3 instructors.
Okay. Wow. I've never heard that before, but then again, I haven't talked to many people who had franchise experience that took that into another business, another brand. So, all right. Very good.
Yes. Our first 3 franchisees taught Bar3 classes.
Okay. Look, I have made more mistakes over my career in franchising than I could count. And you've been in franchising a long time, so I'm hoping maybe you could be transparent and share with maybe the audience to help others that are out there. What would be maybe some of the, maybe a big mistake or challenge you had? Maybe it's Bar3 or with Sit Still, but maybe a challenge or a mistake that was made and you figured it out. And what did you learn?
It's such a good question. It's really like the question because you learn the most from the challenges and the mistakes.
Right.
Things that are working, you just kind of don't pay much attention to.
Totally.
I think one of the things that we really learned at Bar3 and were diligent and disciplined about not necessarily repeating in the same way at Sit Still was at Bar3, it was a very passion-driven culture. I, who oversaw development, I talked to thousands of people who wanted to open Bar3s. And the spirit of those conversations was really around this enthusiasm for the class and the community and all of the feel-good parts of that brand. There was less focus on the business. I didn't have an item 19 in my Bar3 FDD for the entire time I sold 150 locations.
And it didn't matter because they were just...
It wasn't why they wanted to do that. It was about the idea. And I think that there's such beauty in that. That says so much about what is happening at Bar3. But I think kind of set up for some more challenging conversations with owners who then get into the program and they're open and they're like, oh, wait, this is a business and I need to be paying attention to my costs and how much money I'm making, and just was never presented as such. So, when we got into Sit Still, it was really important that we led with this being a business opportunity as much as this is a fun space and a really cool, revolutionary brand. We want our owners to care about the numbers. And we're not shy about that and have really kind of doubled down on leading calls that way. And, from my first conversation with a potential franchisee to the conversations that they have with our operations team, really focused on the model. All the feel-good stuff has to be happening in order for there to be profitability. So the two really speak to each other. But I would say that was sort of the biggest lesson, is being disciplined around this being a business and something that we really want our owners to be successful financially doing.
I hope that other founders that are watching or listening to this podcast really picked up on it, people that are just getting into franchising, because what you did was a very subtle tweak, but it made all the difference on whether franchise owners are going to be successful or they're going to fail.
Yeah.
That was a huge subtle tweak, that it was business first, because it's very, in some businesses, mine included, where it was all about passion.
Yeah.
I ran into a lot of trouble early on with my franchise owners that came on board because they loved sports. Now, as you imagine, Amy, do you think in our office, did we ever talk about home runs and touchdowns and goals? No, not once. We talked about management, marketing, operations, finance, technology.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not sexy,
No.
It's like the things that really matter are not someone's first touch point with your brand.
Thank you for tuning into the Emerging Franchise Brands podcast. For additional insights, guest applications, and to stay connected, visit us at efbpodcast.com. The Emerging Franchise Brands podcast is for entertainment purposes only, and the views expressed do not necessarily represent those of Emerging Franchise Brands, its host Frank Fumey, or Emerging Franchise Group LLC. Any discussed franchise or investment opportunity requires thorough investigation, obtaining proper disclosure documents, and expert consultation before making any investment decisions. The podcast and its host do not offer professional advice or endorsements, and they hold no responsibility for actions, representations, accuracy, or consequential damages related to the podcast content.